It's Hotseat time again on BBC Radio Derby on The Breakfast Show, and I'm pleased to say we've got Anne Weston, the Labour leader of Derbyshire County Council, with us this morning. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Ian. It's nice to be here and talk face to face. We're usually on the phone,
One of those
aren't we?
peculiar situations where somebody we've spoken before, but I don't think I've ever met face to face before. Wonderful. Councils, of course, facing a tough time at the moment, falling funding from government, extra pressure on adult care and children's services. So how bad are things, really? We must talk about that. The Conservatives say Labour are making a meal of finding efficiencies. Labour say they're under intolerable pressure and public services are in real danger as a result of the coalition's cuts. Are you happy being a leader of the council, by the way?
Am I happy? I spend a lot of time being quite angry. I spend a lot of time being determined to try and make a difference, but it gets harder and harder. But I'd much rather be the leader of the council than be in opposition, because that is the most frustrating job in the whole council.
Is being leader frustrating in its own way as well?
In a different way, but at least there is some action that you can take. When you're in opposition, all you can do is commentate on what the other side are doing, and that is really frustrating.
I'm going to go straight to a question from Gary, who's called from Chesterfield. Gary, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Gary.
Yes, it's rather interesting that you use the word angry, because I can assure you that disabled people and families with disabled children are very, very angry at the moment with the devastation and the cuts that are going on in adult care. Now, I just want to say there's a lot of pain and suffering out there, and I think it's about time that Councillor Weston took some responsibility for that, rather than trying to evade it all the time and blame the central government, because we are being hit very hard, disabled people. Now, what I wanted to ask was, we have been campaigning for a couple of years, and we've been trying to put pressure on the council to defer the cuts. Councillor Weston has not listened to that request. I want to ask Anne Weston a specific question. Is it true that John Burrows, the Labour leader of Chesterfield Borough Council, has recently written to her demanding that she defer the cuts until after the general election?
OK, well, there's the question. That's the direct question, Anne.
Well, it is a direct question, and the answer to that is no. Unless there's a letter in the post somewhere, I've not had a letter from John. Talk to him on a regular basis, and he's not mentioned that to me either. I mean, this issue about deferring the cuts, if we knew for sure there was an end in sight to the cuts that are coming down the line from government, then we could defer cuts and we could use the reserves the council's got to get us through that difficult period. But there is no end in sight. Obviously, we've got a general election and that will make a difference one way or the other. But at the moment, we're in a situation where in 2010 we were told these cuts would last for 4 years. We're through that 4-year period and the cuts are still rolling on, and the worst 2 years are still to come. If we'd have not made any cuts at all on the basis of a 4-year period, all the council's reserves would have been spent and we would be absolutely in chaos now. So it's about trying to do a bit of crystal ball gazing, trying to see what the future might hold, and then using the money we've got in a way to protect as much as we can. But we can't, until the government comes clean and says this is going on till whenever, or it's going to stop at a certain point, we have to manage the best we can in the circumstances that we're in. I've spoken to Gary many times. He's been to Matlock and we've listened to what he says. I'm not into trying to just push the blame onto the government, but the fact is that we are reliant on government funding, and if it gets cut, we have to manage the budget that we've got left, and that's the situation we're in. We have put extra money back into children's services and adult social care, so some of those services are being cushioned more than other services are, but that doesn't stop cuts still having to come through because the money isn't there.
Gary says that there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. I mean, do you recognise that fact?
I know that people have suffered losses of services, reductions in services, and I feel really bad. That's one of the things that I get angry about. But we're trying to protect as much as we can. This won't make me popular to say it, but it is true. Derbyshire traditionally had a higher level of service for people, especially around social care services. We always offered a much better service than a lot of other places. And as we cut back on our services, we still do offer better than a lot of places. But that's no comfort to people who are getting less now than they did before.
Purely speaking politically, I mean, in 2009, Labour submitted a motion to the County Council saying the introduction of charging for home care, the raising of the eligibility threshold, will leave thousands of older and disabled people without support and financially penalise thousands more. That was the position then. Within 30 months of taking control of the County Council, you raised the eligibility threshold still further, so only people with a substantial need get help.
Yeah.
That doesn't sit comfortably, does it?
No, not at all. It doesn't. I mean, my issue, I spoke earlier about the frustration of being in opposition. My issue when we were in opposition was that the Conservative administration at the County Council at the time were trying to deny that cuts were being made. They were talking about efficiencies all the time and trying to spin this as if it was in some way an improvement. And they would not accept the fact that this was a direct result of their government's decisions. And they're still trying to deny that even today. Now, if they were being as honest as some other Conservative local government people are being, some Conservative council leaders are being very critical of their government and saying this is going too far. The Conservatives in Derbyshire have never said that, and I think that's a really disingenuous position. They ought to be representing the people that voted for them.
And though we have Anne Weston with us in the hot seat this morning, taking your questions, talking about all things to do with being the leader of Derbyshire County Council. You were talking about the government and cuts. I mean, we always hear from you this figure, this £157 million of cuts over 5 years. Why are you having to make those cuts?
Well, if I just explain, I mean, it's different situations slightly for different councils. So it'll be different for Derby City and it's different for some of the districts and borough councils. But for county councils, the money that we can spend comes from three places. It comes from council tax, it comes from business rates, and it comes from government grant. Now, in Derbyshire, the government grant element has always, whichever government it is, it's always been based on a complicated formula, but that recognises different levels of need. So Derbyshire and places in the Midlands and the North tend to get more government grant because we've got higher levels of need than some of the home counties. Now, it's the government grant element that's being cut the hardest and cut the fastest. So that's why it's affecting us particularly badly, because we got a greater proportion of our income coming from the government, and that's the bit that's being chopped hardest.
That's not the full reason for having to make those savings, though, is it? I mean, even on the County Council website, it says by 2018, we need to save £157 million due to reductions in government grants, inflation, and greater demands on areas of the budget for adult social care and vulnerable children. Yeah,
that's the other side of it. At the same time as government grant is being cut, we've also got, I mean, we all know, thank goodness we're living in a society where people live longer, and that's a great thing. But as people age and we see a greater increase of conditions like dementia, there are greater pressures on services like social care. We see families in crisis because of their own circumstances and the pressures that families are facing. That puts additional demand on council services as well. So,
do you not worry maybe that you disproportionately weigh the argument towards blaming the government for this? I mean, we've looked at the figures and it breaks down as something like £44 million of those £157 million of savings because of the increased demand for those services you're talking about, adult care, children's services, waste collection. £30 million you can put down to inflation, £19 million because of pay increases, £3 million because of the pension fund, that needs to be added into the pension fund, £1 million for elections that you have to pay for, some other minor cost increases, which puts us at about, due to less money coming from central government, actually not £157 million, £41 million of it.
Yeah, but the issue is government funding, traditionally, has increased year on year to take account of factors like inflation and growing demand for service and so on. So a lot of the figures you quoted, the government grant figure would have been increasing year on year to match inflation, for instance. And it's not. The actual real hard cash amount that's coming is being cut. So there's a loss of actual money, and there's the loss of the inflation factor as well. So we had this debate in the council last week where the Conservatives were saying, well, government grant in 2009 was this amount, and now it's this amount slightly more, not a lot more. But that's like saying I was paid £100 a week 10 years ago and I'm paid £105 a week now. So that's all right then. But there's been 10 years of inflation and extra costs in between that are factored in there.
So when you look at, for example, the fact that the 2010 council budget was £515 million a year, and this financial year just gone, £513 million. In cash terms, only a reduction of £2 million, 0.4%. You don't think that tells the whole story?
No, I don't think it does, not at all. I mean, as I say, inflation is a factor in that. That is like saying the world has stood still since 2010, and we know it hasn't. Inflation has increased a lot, especially around things like energy costs. And there are some specific services and products that we have to buy where inflation has really rocketed. So it's not factored that in. It's not factored in, as you've mentioned, the extra demand. So we've got an increasing number of people trying to be provided with a service from what is basically the same amount of budget.
As part of what you're saying there, are you suggesting that the council's costs are close to out of control?
No, I don't accept that. I think we've clamped down really hard on costs. We look very closely at the way that we buy goods and services, and we get savings. We took a report to Cabinet only yesterday about bus services for transporting children to school, saving massively on some of those costs. So we're doing as much as we can to squeeze costs down. We've cut senior management costs by £2 million a year and so on, and we're doing more of that. Department
by department, again, that comparison between 2010-11, 2014-15, the children and young people's budget is down 6%, adult care 4%, environmental services 4%. Corporate is actually increased 4%. What's that?
There's different things within that budget. There are the
Is it fair to call that the bureaucracy?
Well, some of it will be the bureaucracy, and that is shrinking. That is shrinking, but there are within the corporate budget.
In cash terms, it's up 4% since 2010.
Because within the corporate budget are things that we've got to put money on aside for certain liabilities that we know are coming through. That's not about paying bureaucrats to sit in offices. That's about issues that the council knows we've got to fund. Presumably, I'm not sure. I've not got the figures in front of me, but I'm guessing that's what it is.
In your Fair Deal campaign for Derbyshire, I mean, front page of it, you compare yourselves with Hampshire, for example, in spend and cuts. I mean, Derbyshire, we should mention, in 2010, again, got the second largest increase in government grants. So now you could argue we're just coming back into line with others who've lost out in the past. And when Derbyshire got that second largest increase, you know, Hampshire and Oxfordshire got 1.5% increase, the joint lowest at that time.
But that goes back to what I said before, and it's about the government funding being based on identified levels of need. Now, Hampshire and Oxfordshire, I'm not saying everybody that lives there is well-to-do, but they are, by and large, more affluent places, and they don't have the pressures that we have in terms of deprivation and unemployment, people in difficult circumstances. So it's... You know, to my mind, it's entirely right.
The government grant per head for Oxfordshire is £300, £268 Hampshire. The average is £334. Derbyshire gets £378 per head, a lot more than those better off places, as you put them, and better than the average.
Yeah, but like I say, it's based on acknowledged levels of need that the governments of all colours have funded in the past.
You still don't think it's fair?
I don't think it's fair. You know, I mean, if you look at Hampshire and Oxfordshire, as I said, funding comes from three sources. Now, in Hampshire and Oxfordshire, they generate more income from council tax because they tend to have larger properties, and council tax, in some cases, is higher than we charge in Derbyshire. So they get more money from that. They generate more money from business rates because their economies haven't been affected to the same extent that ours has. And they are, you know, they're seeing big growth in their economies. So they're more self-sufficient locally than we've been able to be, and they're less reliant on government grant.
If you were an income taxpayer, a resident of Oxfordshire or Hampshire, and you're saying you get way less per head in government grant from Westminster than Derbyshire, what do you think you'd feel about Derbyshire crying unfair?
I think if I was a fair-minded person, I would look at the level of services that my council was able to provide with the total budget that they'd got, and I would say, if I lived in Oxfordshire, we're not doing too badly, thank you very much. I'm not saying, I've never said that Derbyshire is the worst affected place in the country. If you go to places like Liverpool and Newcastle, where their grant has been cut by 50%, that's a lot more than we've been cut by. It's devastation, and real core services are disappearing fast. Now, that's going to take decades to get over. When hopefully some normality is restored, that's going to take decades again for those places to recover from. We saw it in Derbyshire, didn't we, when the pits closed and a lot of the heavy industry went, and there are places in Derbyshire still that haven't recovered from that, and that shows in all the statistics that we produce, whether it's about health, whether it's about employment, whether it's about educational attainment even, we still haven't recovered in some areas.
Got the hot seat going on this morning. Anne Weston, the leader of the Derbyshire County Council, is with me in the studio. Do you listen to a lot of music, by the way? Is that something you have time for in life?
I do when I'm in the car.
What do you listen to?
I listen to whatever's on the radio. I'm a bit old school, I suppose. I listen to... I can sing you any song from the 70s,
now,
word
there's an
for
offer.
word. But play me anything from the last 10 years and I'm struggling a bit.
Yeah, I think we all stop at some point in our preferences, don't we? We were talking about government cuts and the general election, and I think you said there at some point that, things will be different if there's a change of government. To what extent do you actually know that to be true? I mean, Ed Balls has said nothing that commits to any extra money for local authorities if Labour win the election.
I do get the opportunity with other Labour council leaders to talk to the Labour shadow front bench. And we had such an opportunity at the weekend. What I know for sure is that Labour is committed to a redistribution of the money that there is. So we were talking earlier about whether it's fair, the North versus the Midlands and the South. The South versus the Midlands and the North. And it's acknowledged that that's not fair, and there will be a redistribution of the whole pot to take account of that within the first couple of years of a Labour government. So the pot might
not get bigger, but we might get more of a slice of it.
That's the first step. And that's something that can be done fairly quickly. Nothing happens overnight, does it? Because you're talking big money and big change. But that's the first step, is a redistribution. So we would benefit to a degree. Not, it won't be the answer to all the problems, but it's a start. Beyond that, what I understand, and bear in mind, I'm not on the in the Labour Treasury team by any means, but what I understand is that there's a commitment to balance the current account, which means balance in any year, balance what comes in with what goes out. That's the first task, isn't it? To try, if you're trying to balance your household finances, you try and manage what you were dealing with at the time. So that's where we're at, to try and balance that. What George Osborne seems to want to do is to clear the entire deficit of the nation going back to the Second World War. And that's why the Tory cuts, I think, are so hard and so deep, because they're dealing with the structural deficit that goes way, way, way back. Now, no country, I don't think. This country's survived since the Second World War running a deficit. It seems to be economic practice that countries do that. It's dealing with the here and now that's the issue, and that's what Labour's committed to tackling. Okay. But not going way back.
Your projected budgets for the next couple of years as well do assume council tax increases of 2.5%, and at the moment you're not allowed to go beyond, I think it's 1.99% without calling a referendum. Are you privy to some sort of information? Maybe a Labour government would put the threshold up, cost us more in council tax?
No, that's based on the practice that's been running for a few years now. If you look back to the 5-year financial plans that the Conservatives ran when they were in control of the council, their 5-year plans were based on a 2% and then a 2.5% increase in council tax, and that's based on...
If you're not allowed to do that, isn't that reckless accounting?
That's based on an anticipation that at some point that cap will be relaxed.
By whoever?
Certainly that was the indication from this current government. As I said before, they said it was going to be 4 years of cuts and then the sun would shine again, and we're sitting here still in the dark.
You're a Labour woman, you know Labour better than the other lot. Do you think Labour are likely to do that soon after winning power if they did?
There's no commitment to do that. There's nothing firm on that, and I think...
Well, it's not an election winner, is it? We'll put up your council tax. It wouldn't be in the manifesto.
No, it's not. And I am a Labour woman, and I want to see investment in services, but I don't think we should put an onerous burden on council taxpayers. What I want to see, and neither do I think that I don't want to be sitting here with my begging bowl asking whichever Chancellor it is, whether it's Ed Balls or George Osborne or whoever else. I want to see Derbyshire become more self-sufficient, and that's why we've been driving so hard to get a combined authority set up, because that would give us devolved powers to generate more income locally by growing our economy. At the moment, it feels like council leaders are being asked to do the impossible because there are so many constraints and so many decisions that sit partly at a local level and partly at a government level that you can't make any sense of it. So what we're saying is give us more power locally and then we can drive our own destiny. And hopefully then if we grow the economy, we grow the business rates part of our income stream and we're less reliant on government and we're not always going back to council taxpayers for more.
Going to talk to Stephen, who's waiting very patiently. Sorry about that, in Chesterfield. Morning, Stephen.
Oh, good morning there. Good morning, Anne.
Morning, Stephen.
Right, it's adult social care. Our daughter Caroline, she has a learning and physical disability, and she's presented with a double whammy whereby the co-funding and the transport to day centres is immediately taking out £2,750 approximately from her personal pocket, but at the same time she's reassessed and it's accepted that her assessment needs haven't changed, but there is a severe cut in hours which in actual fact, in my opinion, and I think it could be proven so, it takes the care down to an unsafe level. Caroline, for instance, falls down regularly and she needs one-to-one care out and about. This is accepted recent assessment, indubitably, yes, that's accepted. So when she goes out, she needs a carer to physically help her moving about, but then the carer is also expected at the same time to look after definitely one and probably two more people who have learning difficulties and physical difficulties. I just can't see justice in it, and I can't see how you can warrant the cuts.
And Stephen, I do sympathise, and I can empathise with how you feel. It must be devastating for you as parents of Caroline to see the services she used to get and what's being proposed now. As I said previously, we're trying to put more money into social care, but we're up against this growing demand that we've got. I don't really want to talk too much about your specific case because I don't know the details, but if you contact me at the County Council, we can have that conversation about Caroline and what her needs are. But in general, you're welcome. In general terms, though, I mean, this is the dire straits that we're in relation to this. I mean, social care budget, that is the biggest part of the County Council's budget by far. If you put schools on one side, adult social care takes about, I don't know, it's by far the biggest proportion of the County Council's budget. And try to cushion it as we are doing, and we're putting money out of reserves next year into social care to try and shore it up a little bit more. But we can't shield it entirely from the cuts. And this is the human cost of it. Now, as I say, I will try and do what we can do for your family. But I can't make any promises because this is the situation we and other councils are in. OK, and the other thing then is, why don't you consider a 1.9% increase, for instance, in the council tax, as some councils are doing, to help? I don't think there'd be a problem. It's been stable for so long. And also the reserves, you just mentioned that you're going to put some into that. What happens then if times improve? Will you be able to reassess? No, it's not a reassess, really. It is re-provide more hours and care for people. When you've had the cut, can they have it back? Yeah, the council tax. We had the council budget meeting last Wednesday last week, and we did approve a 1.98% increase in council tax. That will raise for us £5 million more. But what we're having to cut is, in that same year, is £46 million. So you can see the disproportion that there is there. And we can't raise more than 2% council tax because we're not allowed to. So we're doing what we can, and we're trying not to put too much pressure on council taxpayers. But, £5 million, a lot of that will go into social care, but it's not going to tackle the whole problem. Reserves, like I say, we are eking out those reserves to try and shore up some of the more important services, and I think social care is the most important. And hopefully, when we get into a better condition financially, we'll be able to restore some of that back, like you've said. The other thing we're doing is we're working with the NHS across Derbyshire, because we want to try and streamline the way that works. Andy Burnham for Labour is talking about integration of health and social care. If we could do that in Derbyshire and do it properly, I can see that we can save some money there, that then we could reinvest in services. So that's another route through this for us. But as soon as money allows, Stephen, we do want to reinvest in those services. That's why we're trying not to do away with services altogether. We're trying to hang on to something, even though it's less than what we've had before, so that we can build it back in the future.
Stephen, thanks for your call.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging on there
you.
a little while. We've got the leader of Derbyshire County Council, Anne Weston, here this morning. A couple of comments coming in. Andrew in Draycott has texted, inviting the Labour leader, Anne Weston, on live to answer listeners' questions is certainly refreshing and honest. This is great. Usually with either party, it turns into a party of political bashing, drivel and hyperbole. Where I've become sick and tired of the majority of politicians and councillors, whether it's TV or radio. Can't escape these self-indulgent spoilt kids. Thank you, Anne, for your interesting, constructive comment.
Oh, thank you.
We're in hard times and it must be difficult trying to get blood out of a stone, unlike, he says, the Portcullis restaurant in Westminster. On the other hand, I've got an email here from Anne Taylor. Anne says, I was featured on one of your programmes quite a lot last summer because the County Council Social Services have taken away all the funding for my care until my savings have gone down to £50,000. It sounds a lot, but no one could pay all their household bills, gas, electricity, insurance, food, etc., she says, out of the interest from that amount. I receive no state pension. I have never been able to work because of my disability. I do receive disability living allowance, but all that goes on disability-related costs. I have emailed Anne Weston several times to ask her if she could live off the interest from £50,000. She didn't have the courtesy to reply to one of them. So please will you ask her that question and see if you get an answer.
Right, I do know about Anne Taylor's circumstances because she's not just emailed me, she's emailed Claire Neal, who was the Cabinet Member for Social Care and so on, and had lengthy responses from Claire and from officers. So Anne has had responses from the council, and all I would be doing if I responded was giving her the same information again. And we talked earlier about people being angry, and Anne, rightly so, has been angry. And, I'm not in the habit of responding to just something that's shouting at me when I'm not adding anything new to the conversation. Now,
so she has had a response, just not personally from you?
She's had several responses. She's had a lot of responses. And again, I don't want to talk about anybody's particular financial circumstances, but what has happened is the financial threshold for services in Derbyshire used to be £100,000. If you had savings over £100,000, not including your house, but actual savings, then if you were below that, we would pay for some or all of your services. Because of the squeeze on finance, we've had to review that, and we've dropped that down to 50,000. And this is where Anne gets caught by it, because her circumstances are such that she's caught in that change. Now, the national level is 23,000, so we're still well above that. We're still offering more service provided through the council funding to people, but it's less than it was.
Bluntly practical matter. She says, could you live off the interest of £50,000? I know it must be difficult. It must be difficult. But the national situation is, if we were to stick to the national limits, we would have dropped that threshold to £23,000. We haven't done that. We've stuck it at £50,000. Now, if it's difficult to live off the interest, which I'm sure it is, I think that's something she should take up with her MP in terms of getting the national legislation changed. Hot seat time's come around again, 9 until 10, 60 minutes with the decision makers of Derbyshire and East Staffordshire taking your calls, your questions, answering the best they can. And Anne Weston is here, the Labour leader of Derbyshire County Council. Are you enjoying the experience, by the way? Do you like this sort of thing?
Today, this
Yes.
hot seat. It's a bit masochistic, but yes, I am actually. I do like being able to hear what people are saying and respond back. Don't always get the chance to talk directly to people, so it's good. Even though sometimes the messages aren't easy.
I'd imagine the bulk of the time at the moment you're not able to make many popular decisions, are you?
Well, we are making some. We're investing in some things, and perhaps we can talk about that in a minute. But, there is some good stuff still able to be done.
One thing we did talk about earlier on is you're consulting on doing away with a lot of lollipop men and women, school crossing patrols. We had Lisa Pritchard on as a campaigner against that. They had a public meeting last night. I spoke to her earlier this morning. Have a listen to this.
The question I'd like to ask to her is, who is going to take responsibility for the first serious accident or even death on one of these sites where she's proposing that she needs to save money and remove them? Because it's inevitable that something's going to happen if they carry on with these proposals.
It's a high-stakes thing to mess with, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this all came into the public arena last year. We were looking ahead over the next 5-year period, and we were looking at there are two stages to what we have to do. One is we've got to make sure that the council has a budget that will balance, because that's a legal requirement. So there's a financial process that we go through to say, this is how much we expect the income to be, this is what the costs are going to be, this is the gap. What are we going to do about it? And we published last July the 5-year financial plan, and that had a whole list of potential cuts that we would have to make the budget balance. And we did that deliberately because we're not wanting to hide things, and we're not wanting to put a gloss on it. We want to be as honest as we can. And we did it knowing that it would provoke a debate. But then for me and the Labour group at Matlock, the political challenge for us then is to say, right, that's what we need to do to balance the books. What can we do to save some of those services that are at risk? And school crossing patrols was one. Now, in order to get the budget to balance at the time, the whole service was threatened with being cut. What we've done in the meantime, though, between last July and now, is that we found money from different sources that we can shore up most of that service. So most of those school crossing patrols are not going to be cut. The only ones we're going to take away are where there is some physical safety measure already in place. So either a pelican crossing or a zebra crossing. So there's some safe means of children getting across
Lisa
the road.
was saying zebra crossings, quite honestly, are not a safe way of crossing, and cars regularly don't stop at those.
Well, they sometimes don't stop when there's a lollipop person there as well, So I think there's an issue for us all to look at our driving habits and say, what are we doing?
You said yourself just then this was something you did that you knew would provoke a debate. I mean, your critics, this, would suggest that you're scaremongering to make a political point. You're talking about, out of a budget of more than £500 million a year, saving 60 grand by doing this.
No, initially, when the whole service was going to be cut, it was going to be £300,000.
But what you're consulting in doing is taking down the cost from £600,000 a year to £540 you'll still be spending on crossing patrols.
Yeah, because we found money from other places. In particular, we are using public health money. Is
it worth risking life and limb, children crossing the road to school, for the sake of £60,000 a year savings?
Well, we are still looking at other ways we can provide. There's 35 crossings now out of hundreds,
and another 61 down the line potentially.
Well, potentially,
not being replaced.
As and when people retire, they may or may not be replaced. We're looking at each one individually to look at the circumstances. But I mean, for instance, we've got school crossing patrol people on junctions where there are traffic lights, on a proper junction with proper traffic lights, with the green man controlled crossing, and that to me is unnecessary. If you've got a pelican crossing where the green light comes on and you can cross pedestrians, why do you need somebody with a stick and a lollipop?
But that's not the case in all of these.
It's
nearly
not the case
100
in
crossing
all of
patrols
them.
we're talking. And those 61 you refer to, it's all very well saying they may or may not be sort of softening the potential blow to that school when they go. If you're someone contemplating, you've done it for years, maybe stepping down, retiring, the pressure there of thinking, well, if I stop doing this, no one will see them across the road. It's horrible.
It is. I mean, the whole thing's horrible, and every way we turn to try and save money to make the budget balance, somebody rightly is saying, whether it's school crossings or mobile libraries or anything else, somebody says that service is important. Now,
if this goes ahead, if I don't know, if even 35 school crossing patrols are taken out and somebody runs over a child, how's that going to play with your conscience?
It would be devastating, wouldn't it? It would be devastating. But we've got a good track record in terms of road safety anyway in Derbyshire. I think what we need to do as a next step. It was January when we announced that the cut would be smaller than we first anticipated. So we've shrunk the size of the problem. What we need to do now is talk to the schools that those 35 crossings serve and see what we can do. You know, there's a suggestion that we look for sponsorship. I'm always happy to talk if there's local sponsors want to take that up.
It's not ideologically a great fit with your approach to local government, is it? You're happy with lollipop ladies with McDonald's on their sticks?
Listen, I'm not happy, but it's the devil in the deep blue sea, isn't it? I'd rather that and continue the service than it go. We're talking to schools about whether they can fund or part fund some of this.
Of course, if they're academies, they do take that decision and make that provision themselves out of their own centrally provided budget, don't they? So could this drive more schools down the academy route?
Not necessarily.
Which you're not a fan of?
Not necessarily. They
can get extra money from government to do that.
Well, I don't know that they do in Derbyshire, to be honest. I think we fund the whole lot. And I certainly wouldn't be, and I don't think this would be the deciding factor for a school as to whether they went to be an academy or not. It might be a factor, but I think there's an issue for us all. Every school has a school travel plan, which is about children getting safely to school, and they try to encourage parents to get involved in that problem. I mean, a lot of the time when children are crossing the road with a lollipop person, they're with parents anyway. So, I think we need to look at the thing in the round. We have minimised the problem. It's not gone away altogether, and I accept that Lisa is concerned, and she's right to be. If I was a parent, so would I be. And we are looking to see if we can... it may be possible, because capital budgets aren't under as much pressure as the revenue budget. It may be possible that where the road traffic conditions are such, we can convert some of the zebras into pelicans, which gives a better sense of safety, I think. So that's another option if the circumstances warrant it.
Let's move on. I got Liz waiting on the line. Liz is in Bakewell. Morning, Liz.
Good morning, Ian. Good morning, Anne.
Morning, Liz.
Good morning. Now, I want to know why we are losing Bakewell Police Station. It shouldn't really be allowed in the heart of the Peak District. I just can't believe this is happening.
OK, that's not a county council decision. That's there's a separate police and crime commissioner and the chief constable, and they're making those decisions. But it's a symptom of the same problem, is that money is being cut all over the place.
It's not a county council decision, Anne, but it's something you will take a view on. It affects the people that you represent. You will. And, OK, let me put a mischievous hat on here. Would you be fighting it harder if one of your friends wasn't the police and crime commissioner, rubber stamping this? Your former deputy, Alan Charles.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Alan's doing a fantastic job in difficult times. And, as hard as the problems are for councils, they're the same for police and fire authorities as well. And the NHS come to that. So what we're doing, what we've been doing for a number of years, is trying to work together and share accommodation. So there are instances where police, local police safer neighbourhood teams share council accommodation. That happens in South Normanton and any number of other places.
If it wasn't Alan Charles okaying that decision, do you think you'd be making stronger representations about that?
I've got enough on making representations about the services that I've got to fight for. Whoever it was, whether it was Alan Charles or anybody else, I think these things all mesh together.
Do you think they should have done more of a public consultation? It all seemed to be a bit of a stitch-up, really, that the police force looked into what they were going to do with the estate. They brought out the report on a Friday, and Monday morning, virtually Tuesday, I think it was, the Commissioner's office said, yeah, fine, good, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the detail of what the consultation rules are. I know when councils are making changes to service, we have to go through a lengthy consultation
But regardless
process.
of the rules, do you think it would have made sense? It would have been better to ask people, to give people the facts and say, this is what we've got to do, what would you do?
I always think it's better to talk to people and get their views. But I'm told this was a chief constable decision and it's a resources decision. Now, I don't know if that's right or not. But
was it short-sighted of the commissioner who represents the public not to seek more broadly public opinion before agreeing the proposals?
You're asking me to make a comment on something that I'm not directly involved in. I think that's really difficult.
But it affects the life of the county.
It does. It does. Now, I don't know how many people use a police station in the way that they perhaps used to. I don't know how much time police officers spend in police stations. It's not the same as it used to be. They do tend to be out more on the street. They tend to be more mobile because they've got smartphones and goodness knows what that they can use. And I do know that it's a significant factor for any community when a building like that is threatened with closure. There may be some scope for us to work with Alan to try and, like I say, accommodate some of the police services within our...
When you say there may be scope, are you thinking off the top of your head now, or have you had conversations?
I've had the conversation with Alan. I said, we know that there are some places where the police do work in council offices and it's shared accommodation and it works really well. So we could do more of that. And that was something that when I spoke to him last that we talked about. So, we'll be working on that in the future.
Anne Weston is the leader of Derbyshire County Council. We've got until 10 o'clock if you'd like to get in with a question. 10 more minutes or so. Graham's in Bell. Good morning, Graham. Oh, I believe Graham's there somewhere. Bear with me a second and we'll find him. Hello, Graham.
I'm talking to you now.
Yes. Well, if I turned you up, I could hear you.
You can sure you can...
If I could work it, we'd be fine.
Get sorted at your end.
My end's fine now.
Yeah.
Say good morning to Anne, Graham.
Good morning, Anne.
Morning, Graham.
I must say, well done for coming on the programme and being the Aunt Sally to be thrown at.
Thank you.
So here goes.
Right.
You're on record as saying the last thing you wanted to do was to increase council tax. You're on record as saying that. Now, you need not have, had you accepted the government offer of a subsidy to keep the council tax down to a nil increase. You have instead increased the council tax by the maximum limit, the 1.99 that you could before the local whatever you call it, restrictions or referendum kicked in that you had to go to all of us then and get our decision. Okay?
Yeah.
The Derby City Council, also Labour-controlled, have done the same thing, as has the police committee, Labour-controlled again. No political inclinations here, you understand? And they have increased, again, the maximum possible before going to a referendum. I think I pay enough now. Many people pay nothing at all, so the extra load that you load on on us, payers, every year, is paid by the same increase by the same few payers. Don't forget that the base rate each year goes up by the amount that was imposed last year, if you like. So you get an increased base rate starting figure. It isn't 2% more, it's more than that when you go look at it like that. Those are my comments.
Okay, Graham.
Okay. Can I respond to that? I mean,
please do, that's what I'm here for,
I mean, the grant that the government gave, it's called the Council Tax Freeze Grant. They only offer the equivalent of 1% of council tax. So what they give us would be 2.5 million, something like that, what they would have given us. But if they give it as grant for each year, so that doesn't get put into the council's budget for next year, the year after, and the year after that. Now, the previous administration, the Conservatives, they did take that grant to the tune over the years that they took it. It now mounts up to something like £12.5 million. Now, there's no guarantee from Eric Pickles or anybody else in government that will continue. So there's a potential cliff edge there that if Eric Pickles or George Osborne said, well, we're not paying that anymore, that's £12.5 million more cuts in the future that we'd have to make. So what I'm saying is it doesn't give the council any financial security. It deals with part of the problem in the particular year, but for the future years, it's just storing up problems for the future.
And when you were talking about the general government issue of addressing the deficit earlier on, you said we primarily should be concerned with the here and now. That seems to contradict that.
Yeah, and what I want, and when the here and now for councils, and it's not about the council, the institution, it's about the services that the council provides for people.
If the freeze grant is available here and now, why not take it this year?
Because it doesn't. As I say, the maximum they will give is for a 1% equivalent of council tax, which is 2-point-something million. We heard Stephen earlier saying about the impact of the cuts on his family and his daughter. Even the increase that we're proposing, raising only 5%, is a drop in the ocean. To take something less than that, I think, is shortchanging people like Stephen and his daughter and Gary that was on before. And it's striking that balance. On the political side, Graham quoted Derbyshire, which is Labour, and Derby City, which is Labour. But I have to tell you that a lot of the county councils, most of the county councils, are Conservative run. We've talked about Oxfordshire and Hampshire and Surrey and Kent. They're all Conservative. And most of those, the majority of those, are putting their council tax up. So it's not a party political issue, it's about a reflection of the funding situation we're all in.
So what you're basically saying is that I have got to pay more in my council tax so that you can spend more on welfare for everybody else, if you like, the people you see as deserving causes.
It's not welfare as such, is it? It's about social care services to some extent and services to keep children safe.
I've got to pay more for it, although...
and so have I. Because I pay council tax. And
depends what your level of income is compared with mine.
Indeed.
If you've got a bigger house, you'll pay more into the pot, to be fair, Graham.
Yes, that's very true. I agree. Yeah. But the same people appear to be paying all the increase every time. There's indicators a lot of people pay none at all, which I don't think is fair at all.
But that, again, that's the system we've got, and it's not within my power to change that. All I would say is, I think it's about what sort of a society do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a place where,
like East Germany, Berlin?
Well, that's not the comparison, is it? I think it's.
Well, I've been there. I've seen it. It's absolutely drab, and they seem, absolutely trouser seats hanging out.
Do you know what? I've got to stand up for Eastern Germany. I lived in Jena for a year. It was a fabulous place. Sorry.
Really?
Yeah, really.
You try the West. That's even better.
Oh, I've lived in Munich as well. Yeah. Anyway, let's not talk about Germany.
You boys carry on with your travel stories.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate you getting back to me.
Thank you for your question, Graham. Graham's in Belper. I just want to put this one to you. We're running out of time here, and beautiful place, Jena, in China. Where were we? Oh, yes, talking to the leader of the district council, the county council, Anne Weston here, the Labour leader of Derbyshire County Council. Here's one that came in by text. There's no name, but it says, a spending question for the head of the council. Why do they spend a massive amount of money having their new vehicles, vans, pickups, lorries, painted in their unique shade of orange? Manufacturer's white is no extra cost at purchase. Orange is an extra charge.
Well, I've been asked this question before, and I took it back to officers and I said to them, why are we paying over the odds for orange vans? Shouldn't we just have white vans? And I'm told that the purchasing agreement we've got means that there is no extra cost for them being orange. That's how they come out of the factory, and the cost is the same for an orange van as a white van because of the purchasing arrangements we've got. So I've already asked that. That's the answer I've had.
Orange is not extra.
No.
There you go. Thank you very much. I daren't really ask you another question because you won't have time to answer anything else. We've got about a minute left of the programme. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thanks, Ian. It's been really interesting. Can I say, though, we are investing in some things. We've put extra money in to protect some of the bus services that we subsidise. We've put extra money in to expand the B line so that young people up to the age of 18 can travel to work and so on. And as much as anything, it's for people to understand that it's not so much what you see as what. It's not so much what gets cut, it's what doesn't get cut. It's the stuff we're trying to protect that isn't obvious, but we're trying to keep as much going as we can through these tough times.
And what do you hope when you get to the end of being, whenever that is, a leader of the county council? What would you hope to have achieved as your best legacy?
Well, Of all the times to be the leader of a council, this is not the one I would have chosen, but you do what you have to do in the times that you're in. We've got elections in 2017 for the county council. We'll be making our case. I hope by then we can start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I hope by then, I'm pretty confident we'll have a combined authority and we'll be able to take more control of our own destiny, because that to me is what we need to do. Wrestle the power and some of the money away from Westminster and Whitehall, spend it locally and get better results for people.
Thank you. Anne Weston, the Labour leader of Derbyshire County Council, in the hot seat this morning.